today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about how to rebalance that relationship, or if it feels a little one-sided or it feels wonky or it's not working, how to make it ride right. I think relationships are not that different. I think they become imbalanced when maybe we change seats without talking about it. Clear ownership and ultimate responsibility reduces scorekeeping. We stop taking their inventory and we start taking our own. There was balance in ownership and tasks. So the mental load isn't about who does more. It's about who's carrying the load and are you carrying it evenly? Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. I'm your host, Rich Heller, and today we're talking about the mental load reset, how to fix the invisible imbalance in your relationship. And it might be in you too. What this reminds me of is when you get on a plane nowadays, they say, folks, do not change seats. We have empty seats today, but do not change seats without talking to the flight attendant because the plane has been specially balanced for takeoff and landing and for efficiency. I think relationships are not that different. I think they become imbalanced when maybe we change seats without talking about it. Actually, I'm having this experience on a small scale right now. I'm getting ready to get on a plane and take a trip, and I've been away some, and we did not talk about what the impact of my being away was going to be on the way our household runs. And guess what? There's a little tension, and we're needing to talk it through because I did not really plan it very well in terms of who's going to cover my load. My wife says I don't help out enough, but I do the dishes, I cook, I handle bedtime. She says it's not about chores, it's about mental load, and I honestly don't know what that means. So let's talk about the mental load. What is a mental load? A mental load is the often unspoken, maybe even invisible, management of work, family life, the work of family life. Let's be clear. It's about planning family life. I'm not talking about when are we going to put an addition on the house, though that might be part of it. I'm talking about the way the way the family runs. It's a holiday season. Is anyone thinking about the way the family runs? One person is, I promise you, are both people. It's about tracking. Are we on course? What's coming up that might be different? In the last episode, we talked about Brad losing a job right around the holidays, and that was a big disturbance. Brad did not track how his disturbance was going to impact his wife and his family. Are we remembering everything that needs to be remembered? Are we anticipating everything we can anticipate? Right? You have a goal for your business, and you organize all the assets of your business, assets being people, systems, finances, so that you can move toward that goal. And families are not any different. Businesses are just, what's the word I'm looking for? They are symbolic. They are abstractions is the word I'm looking for. They are abstractions of a family. A business is an abstraction of a family. It's not a family, but it runs on a lot of the same principles. And when one partner is carrying most of that load cognitively, it leads to resentment. It leads to burnout. It leads to emotional distance. Now, sometimes a partner takes that territory and fights off anyone else who's going to try and step into it because they feel that if they can control those things, they feel validated. If they can control those things, their world is at peace. They're not going to let anyone else mess it up. And that is a recipe for disaster in the long run. In the short run, the other partner's like, great, you take that. You manage that thing. I'll go smoke cigars, watch football, have an affair, whatever. But in the long run, it's not an effective strategy. In fact, that strategy is based on old hurts and old pains creeping into the marriage. Fixing the imbalance isn't about doing more tasks, right? It's not about saying, all right, not only what did Brad say, do the dishes, cook, and handle bedtime. It's about understanding how all those things work together and carrying the load, the knowledge, and the willingness, the intention to help adjust that load when things change, whether you change it or whether something else changes it. Right? In the last episode, we talked about big changes can blow up families. It's about both partners being invested in seeing a change is coming. This is how we're going to manage it. Well, guess what? Brad and Gwen, remember them? They know something about this. Brad and Gwen had weathered a tough year. Last episode, I told you all about it. Brad and Gwen had weathered Brad losing his job during the holidays, and this was really upsetting. They were doing better now, but Gwen was tired. She wasn't angry. She was just really, really tired. She had carried Brad through the loss of his job, finding a new job, and not only that, but in terms of the functioning of the household, when Brad lost his job, the whole functioning of the household emotionally shifted. When he got a new job, it had to adjust back. She carried all of that. She was exhausted. She said, I appreciate everything Brad does, but I'm the only one who remembers how to care for everyone in this household. I'm the only one who's balancing our child's needs, Brad's needs, my needs, Brad's parents, my parents, our neighbors, our child's friends in schools, parents, parent-teacher conferences. I carry all of that. It wasn't about the doing. It was about emotionally in being involved and invested. The only metaphor I can give you, let's go back to business. The only metaphor I can give you is if you're the boss, even if you own a business and you hardly ever work in the business, everyone else is doing the work. They're doing the work. You still carry the responsibility. What that means is if the business starts to fail, you carry not just the emotional experience of failure, but the financial impact of that failure. Even though you're not that deeply involved, you carry it. The employees are like, oh, business is failing. I'll get a new job. Her problem. That was Gwen's story. Gwen was carrying the emotional load for the whole family. When I explained this to Brad, he was like, I get it. I'm doing stuff, but it's not about the doing stuff. It's about the emotional load. I got it. So we had them list all of the tasks, even though it's not about tasks, and they were broken down into areas. And then we had them analyze who really owned each thing. And what came out was, even though Brad did the dishes, if Brad didn't do the dishes, it fell on Gwen. What came out is, yeah, Brad cooked sometimes, but ultimately the purchaser of food and the person who made sure that there was breakfast and dinner and food at school was Gwen. Brad put their child to bed sometimes. But if Brad had to do a project at night, that fell on Gwen. There wasn't even a question who was ultimately responsible. She was carrying it. And for that matter, if Brad reached out to their family, Gwen in the end owned whether that relationship was working out. She owned the responsibility of the success of their family. As a part of other families, as a unit in their community, she owned it. He did things. He did lots of things. He didn't own them. Are you feeling what I'm laying down here? And I'm going to tell you, sometimes in some families, it's Brad who owns all that, not Gwen. Right? I'm talking about a traditional role relationship. But the fact of the matter is there are plenty of men now who own the emotional side of the family and the women who are doing all the work. It doesn't matter. Gender doesn't matter here. It's about the concept of who owns it. They created some clear leadership zones. And those leadership zones were based on strengths. Now, that doesn't mean that leader did everything in that zone. Just like Brad cooked sometimes, just like Brad cleaned the dishes sometimes, if Brad owned a zone, Gwen could help. Let's say we're going to go traditional here. No, let's go non-traditional. Let's say that Brad owns schools. He owns everything about schools. He's responsible for showing up parent-teacher conferences. Gwen can come. He invites her, but it is assumed that if Gwen can't come for some reason, he goes. He owns homework. Gwen does homework, but he owns it if she can't do it for some reason. He has all of that. He owns it. Does it mean that he's always doing all of that? No. Gwen loves doing homework with her children. She loves going to parent-teacher conferences. She loves showing up at the school fair. She loves going to their soccer game. But he owns it. He owns, where is that going? How is it going to be successful? Who do we need to talk to? Who do we need to be involved with? What are the tools that we need? How much money is it going to cost? He owns the success of that like he would own the success of a business. Well, let's say Gwen owns structural security of the home. Gwen knows all the contractors, has all the phone numbers. Something happens while Gwen's away on business. Brad doesn't know what to do. Gwen, the roof's leaking. Who do I call? She gives it to him. He calls it. He makes it happen. She still owns it, though. If Gwen were a really good manager, she would. If I were a really good manager, when I'm going to go somewhere, I would make sure that everything that I'm responsible for was covered and that all the resources that those people needed would have to cover an emergency would be there so that they don't have to call me up in a panic. Right? It's how we, as zone leaders, how we set this up has a lot to do with success. I'm going to be really transparent, right? Because this is good for, I'm going to do a little therapy right now, right here on the podcast. I'm going to own the fact that I've been away last week for 4 days and going away this week for 3 nights. I'm going to own that I did that without, not only did I not do that without assigning it properly, I just dumped it and gave it to them. I think I might have done it unconsciously. I might have done it that way because I'm feeling unappreciated. And I wanted them to appreciate me. Now, instead, what I got was, what? You're going away? It sucks that you're going away again. See, this is what happens when you let your unconscious needs express themselves sideways instead of expressing them directly. So note to self, let partner know a little appreciation would be nice. And make sure you delegate properly when you go on a trip. All right, so that's what Brad and Gwen worked on. They also made sure that even if somebody had a leadership zone, that they were the prime decision maker because their skills, latent abilities, talents, what they knew about, what they were comfortable with, what they were good at, basically fit that zone. Even though they had that zone, even though Brad was the most awesome education manager a family ever saw, Gwen had veto power. If something came up in the school zone that she absolutely thought was wrong, she had veto power. But Brad, we cannot do that. Brad needed to honor that because that's partnership. All right, partnership's not dictatorial. Now, this can lead to conflict, and conflict's not bad. It's how we handle it. If Brad wants to control that zone because it makes him feel good to control it, then he's going to kick butt and takes names. And if she's sure that that thing is wrong, she's going to kick butt and takes name, and they're going to try and control each other, and the whole thing blows up. But Brad and Gwen were smarter than that. They knew that what they needed to manage was themselves, and Brad knew that if Gwen really felt something was not right, there was probably a good reason for it. He may not get it, but he trusted her enough to know and honor her instinct. They also had a recovery space. They had individual time to recharge their batteries. In the last episode, we talked about how Gwen didn't get to recharge her battery. You have to charge your battery first. It sounds selfish, but if you want to help your partner, your battery needs to be 100% or as close to it as possible. You cannot help other people adequately if your battery is 50% because you help them 50%. Or you'll blow up. They had recovery's time built into their schedules. They had veto power. They had ownership. They had respect. And they more than anything, they knew that they were the ones that needed to change, not the other person. They knew that if they changed individually, that the relationship would by definition change. Instead of changing seats in the plane and not telling their partner, they would change telling their partner. We're not just talking about now, we're not talking about the leadership zones, we're talking about the emotional zones. What I read, that little story, that little therapy I did, there's an emotional zone there. If you feel like you're not receiving enough acknowledgement for what you do, you don't just change seats and watch the plane go unbalanced, which is kind of what I did. What you do is you say, hey, I'm feeling a little unacknowledged. And this trip I'm making is something I really need to do for me. And I'm going to make sure that you have all the tools and resources that you need to manage things while I'm gone. And when I come back, let's please spend some special time together. That's making sure that you keep the plane balanced instead of just changing seats. Awareness started to replace assumption. So they become aware of what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how to shift it, right? I wish I could tell you I'm perfect, but obviously I act out just like everyone else. I'm aware of it. I'm telling all of you about it. I'm telling all of you about it to understand that's okay. Because once the invisible becomes visible, change individually and as a team is possible. They let go of resentment and worked on personal responsibility and team responsibility because ownership, clear ownership and ultimate responsibility reduces scorekeeping. We stop taking their inventory and we start taking our own. There was balance in ownership and tasks. And so they stopped being exhausted. There was time to recharge their batteries, so they stopped being exhausted. They stopped being reactive. They started being proactive. And in its place, Brad felt respected and Gwen felt emotionally heard and validated. So the mental load isn't about who does more. It's about who's carrying the load and are you carrying it evenly? I'll give you one more metaphor. If you've got two horses who are yoked to a carriage, let's say your family is the carriage, two pulling horses, and they're not equally yoked. One of them is carrying a lot more than the other. The carriage isn't going to go straight, for one thing, because one's always going to be, if you have two of them, it's always going to be going to one side if one's carrying more of the load. The other's going to get exhausted. One of them's going to get bored and distracted. And so being equally yoked in a marriage is about having shared perspective and shared responsibility. In Christian groups, they talk about unequally yoked as one's a Christian and the other's not. That can be true, but I'm in a marriage like that, where one of us is a person of faith and the other one is not. And yet, we are very much equally yoked when it comes to pulling our family forward. Now, sometimes we pull in slightly different directions, and that's another episode. And we have ways of working through that because the 10,000-foot up vision is very similar. But that's another episode. In the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe. And I have a challenge for you. It's the Rich in Relationship Challenge going into the new year. There are a few things that I want from you. I have done over 400 episodes of Rich in Relationship at this point. Woohoo! I mean, that is freaking awesome. 400 episodes. Nurturing and growing our community through those episodes. Here's what I want. I want more feedback. One of my listeners said he didn't like this background. So we're probably going to change the background. He said, Rich, you're not this guy that the bookshelves represent. And I was just looking for something balanced as a background. So we're going to work on the background. I want feedback, though, like that. What's working about Rich in Relationship for you? What can we do better? That's number one. Number two, I have a personal challenge. If you would like free coaching, I will coach you on the show for free. We will keep you anonymous. We'll mask your voice, but whatever you want, or if you want to be seen, I will coach you. Let me know that you want to be coached. We want to launch a segment in 2026 where we do coaching live on Rich in Relationships so you can see what the process is like to move from blame to responsibility, for example. That's two things. Is there a third thing? I think the third thing is just subscribe and like. Have a wonderful day and an amazing tomorrow. And thank you so much.